So let me read you through some of what Carragher has had to say. And like I said, he's perfectly within his rights to have an opinion. He's a paid pundit. And Mo did mention him by name, so this was probably going to be expected. And I've no issues with it. I do, however, have an issue with who Carragher won't call out, which is those above and the manager's failures. So Jamie Carragher said, when we're talking about throwing people under the bus, he thrown Liverpool right back under the bus for the 8 years. Can you imagine playing behind him for 8 years? But we accept it because he's a superstar and he scored 250 goals. He's given me, as a Liverpool supporter, one of the greatest nights of my life. One thing I want to remind Salah, and maybe his agent, before he came to Liverpool, Mo Salah was known as the guy who failed at Chelsea. That's just a fact. He's also the greatest player the country has ever had. Egypt in the AFCON are the most successful nation. He hasn't won the AFCON. That's not me trying to put him down as a player. Kind of is though, Jamie, isn't it? What it tells you is Mo Salah and his agent, it's not about an individual. You were not a star when you came into Liverpool. No matter how good of a player you are, you need help from the teammates, the manager, and the fans. It's important he remembers that when he's talking there. It's all about me, me, me. Now, like I said, Carragher's made really good points, and I actually agree with a lot of what he said. But where was the energy for Trent when Trent was sticking 2 fingers up to the club and Trent was taking Spanish lessons and everybody knew, but how dare people boo Trent? That's not the Liverpool way. The hypocrisy from these people are off the fucking charts. Because I don't remember that energy. It's selective accountability over and over and over. That's my take on it. And like I said, Carragher's within his rights to have a say. Mo name checked them. You're putting words in Carragher's mouth? I'm reading out his own fucking words. How hard is that for you to comprehend? I'm reading his own words. The words he used his mouth to speak. How is that me putting words into his mouth? Genuinely baffled. It's no accident, by the way, that all the people being abusive to me in the chat are people I've never seen before. So crack on. Crack on. But if you don't have anything positive to contribute, stop wasting my time. Because there are people here who want to have a conversation about it, who are concerned about it, and don't just come in to shit all over other people. Ultimately, let's be honest, is anybody happy with this? Anyone? As a Liverpool fan, are you happy with where the club is right now? Regardless of a side. Because we shouldn't be forced to pick a side. We're supposed to tune in, unwind, and relax and watch the football team we all love go out there and fight for the cause and play for the badge. That's it. That's what we're supposed to do. But now, that's not the case because it's turning into a distraction. It's turning into a circus. And none of that is the Liverpool way. So there is no winners in this. None. But again, it just ends up with us all having to argue with each other over it. XX Spider, how are you, mate? Said, I'm torn in all honesty. Part of me thinks to back Mo. Well, then we run the risk of turning into United. At the same time with Arna, perhaps it's better to remove both. That's what I deem the only possible outcome here. Because let's say Salah's sold, right? Let's just say January comes along and Salah's sold. Even with the best of intentions, there were going to be people in that dressing room unhappy with that situation. That's just human nature. You know, if you're one of his best mates and your best mate forced out of a job that you enjoyed, you know, the camaraderie with and you enjoyed working with, and that guy's brushed out, you're going to feel a tad of resentment there. And you're going to ask why. So that's why I'm firmly of the belief that both of them probably have to leave the club. Because look, I'll be the first one to say to you, you can't back a player over a manager. You just can't do that. It makes the club look weak. It's the same way I said, I couldn't imagine Liverpool ever giving out a contract to Mo or anyone else that says you play every week. You just can't do that. Do you think Salah's comments will spur the team on, or will they go the other way and get worse? Tough to know. It's really tough to know, mate, because, we recorded a podcast earlier on, myself, Chris and Connor, and we were talking about the point up till we got the penalty given against us against Leeds. And up to that point, I was fully convinced we're going to go on and win that game. And I was fully convinced we were going to have a conversation about finally seeing that bit of fight coming back in. Because that was a bit of an improvement. They're definitely, like I said to you guys, it wasn't going to be easy going to Ellen Road. They were going to be up for it. And I actually thought we matched them in that fight for big chunks of the game. But when the first knock to the confidence came, let's be honest, was there anybody at all who was surprised when Leeds got the second goal after the Canada penalty incident? It almost felt like an inevitability at that point. And then the guys went and showed great pressure and great courage to go 3-2 up again. But it failed. So now what we have, now hear me out on this, now what we have is a Gakpo injured, a Frimpong who was injured, a Bradley who was injured, and we've got so many injuries, and we're going with a smaller squad that isn't fit to go over to Italy to take on them in the Champions League. Because Slot has had to play too many players over and over again and no rotation. I've said this for weeks. He has 6 forwards, but he only really has 4. And because he having to play those 4 all the time, it's going to end up in injuries and strain. And clear as day, puts Mo on the bench, limit him to 3 forwards, and what happens? Gakpo's injured. It's no surprise. Playing Virgil and Canade week in and week out, even if their form is brilliant, you're dicing with an injury. And you can say to me, Craig, we were unlucky with Leone, and of course we were. But we don't really know how many first team chances Leone was going to get this season. We can only really think of him in the same way we think of Rio Wengamoa. And that he might have got a few minutes here, there, cup games, a few bits and pieces for the first season. But the real failure was to not bring in the centre-back. And that's not on the manager, that's not on Salah, or that's not on you. That's on Hughes and Edwards. They tried to be clever to save a few million quid, and now this is the outcome. They sold Diaz and they didn't replace him, and the narrative was that they don't want to block the pathway for young Rio Wengamoa. But they're not playing Rio Wengamoa, so they're doing that themselves. So then you've got a youngster on the bench who's frustrated. You've got a Chiesa who doesn't know what's up. You've got a Salah who's now alienated himself after being put on the bench for 3 games. You've got an Isak who's shot in confidence. And you've got an Ekitike who the manager had actually dropped. And he was the only one that looked like he was at it. These aren't debatable things. This is conscious decisions. And the outcome of that is what we're seeing, which is a failure on the pitch. And remember, that's the most important thing in all of this, is the results and the performances. Morale is at an all-time low. Deutscher Kopite said, I totally agree with Cara. Mo is disgraceful for airing his dirty laundry in public and embarrassing the club. Look, like I've said, Cara has every right to give his opinion. He's paid to do it. And he was name-checked. But I don't think he holds everybody to the same standard. Because they were all very quiet when Trent was sticking 2 fingers up to the club. Very quiet then until he was booed. And then all of a sudden the fans were the bad guys. And this wasn't the Liverpool way. But again, like I said at the very start of this stream, when I read out that quote, club sources said they expected Mohamed Salah to come up and be frustrated. And they could see it week on week. But what did they do to nip it in the bud? Nothing. They sat back and allowed it to happen because it suited them to have it happen. Make no mistake about that.